You say you're over them, that you want to move forward, but then tell me, why do you still think of that person every day? Why, even knowing they betrayed you, do you miss them? Why does every notification on your phone quicken your heart in the hope that it's them even after everything? Don't lie to yourself. You don't miss the person themselves, you miss what you projected onto them, the illusion of love, the reflection of what you wanted them to be. Carl Jung said that what we do not face in ourselves, we will meet as fate, and maybe that's exactly what's happening to you right now. You are not just dealing with heartbreak, you are facing a mirror that is trying to show you something you never had the courage to see. This is not about quick fixes or shallow advice, nor about how to move on pretending nothing happened. Here the truth will hurt, it will poke at wounds you tried to hide, but it will also set you free. The reality is brutal. Often what we call love is just our shadow clinging to someone who feeds our unhealed wounds. It's your unconscious begging for recognition, even if it means staying attached to someone who destroys you. This is not love, it's imprisonment. And what if I told you that this attachment, this pain, this anxiety you feel every time you find yourself ignored or rejected has nothing to do with the person and everything to do with what you have yet to find within yourself? I will guide you through a deep, dark, and transformative journey. We will explore the hidden mechanisms of your mind, understand why you cling to those who hurt you, and most importantly, how to begin to set yourself free. But be prepared. What you are about to hear may not be easy, because the truth never is. But it is only by facing this truth that you will finally stop begging for love and start to find yourself. Have you ever wondered why you feel so deeply connected to someone who has repeatedly shown they don't value you? Why, despite the broken promises, the manipulation, and the sleepless nights filled with tears, something inside you still yearns for their approval? The answer lies not within them, but buried deep within your own psyche. Carl Jung understood that relationships are not simple interactions between two separate beings, but complex mirrors reflecting our innermost unconscious world. When we form intense emotional bonds, we are rarely seeing the other person as they truly are. Instead, we project onto them fragments of our own soul that we have lost connection with throughout our lives. This is what Jung called psychological projection. You are not attached to this person for who they actually are, but for what they represent in your internal landscape. Perhaps they embodied, even momentarily, qualities of the anima or animus, those primordial images of feminine and masculine energies that Jung identified as living within each person's unconscious. These archetypes represent what we feel incomplete without, what we desperately seek to integrate. The danger appears when projection creates such a powerful illusion that we mistake our psychological dependency for authentic love. What begins as attraction rapidly morphs into obsession when the real person inevitably fails to match the perfect image we've projected onto them. This is where the painful cycle begins. We start surrendering our boundaries, justifying mistreatment, and sacrificing our dignity, all to maintain a connection that exists primarily in our imagination. It was never truly love. It was an unconscious need cloaked in romantic fantasy. And as long as you continue searching externally for what can only be found within yourself, you remain trapped in emotional servitude to others. You become hostage to their validation, analyzing every text message for hidden meaning, interpreting their inconsistency as depth, measuring your worth through their fleeting attention. All because somewhere deep inside, your unconscious believes you are incomplete without their recognition. Jung warned that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. This is not simply bad luck in love. It is unconscious programming creating predictable outcomes. So how do you break free from this psychological prison? How do you stop surrendering your power to someone who has repeatedly demonstrated they don't deserve it? First, you must understand the unconscious search for external validation and the devastating price you pay for betraying your authentic self. You learned too early that you needed to please in order to be loved, that you needed to be good, be uncomplaining, be endlessly forgiving to deserve someone's attention. This pattern didn't begin with your current heartbreak. It was established long before them, in the formative relationships that taught you love must be earned through self-erasure. The betrayal of self occurs the moment you learned that you needed to be someone else to be worthy of love. You internalized early that you must be perfect, accommodating, and without needs to deserve someone's presence. And so you constructed a carefully crafted persona, a psychological mask designed to earn the approval that seemed conditional from the beginning. Carl Jung called this adaptive mechanism the persona, the social character we develop to function in the world. While necessary for basic social cohesion, when we over-identify with this mask, believing it's our true self, we suffocate the authentic being struggling to emerge beneath it. This is precisely what happens in relationships defined by emotional dependency and unbalanced attachment. You begin dimming your light to avoid threatening them. You swallow your needs, silence your intuition, and ignore red flags, all to prevent triggering their withdrawal. You become smaller, quieter, more accommodating, contorting yourself to fit into increasingly restrictive spaces within the relationship. The validation you desperately seek from them, in their intermittent attention, their conditional approval, their rare moments of tenderness, remains perpetually insufficient. Because no matter how convincingly they occasionally claim to value you, when you're living disconnected from your authentic self, no external validation can fill that void. It's like pouring water into a vessel with no bottom. The emptiness consuming you isn't longing for them. It's grief for the parts of yourself you've sacrificed at the altar of their approval. This emptiness represents mourning for what you abandoned to be accepted, for the freedom to exist authentically without fear of abandonment. As long as your sense of worth remains hostage to their perception, each unanswered message becomes existential crisis. Each period of silence feels like rejection. Each criticism cuts to your core. This is where anxiety takes root, that tightness constricting your chest, the sleepless nights reviewing conversations, the compulsive checking of your phone, the hypervigilance scanning for signs of their disapproval. What you fear most isn't actually losing them. It's confronting the terrifying realization that you've become unrecognizable to yourself in your desperate attempts to preserve a connection that required your self-betrayal from the beginning. This anxiety isn't your enemy, though. It's a messenger, a symptom that your psyche is in profound conflict. Parts of your authentic self are fighting to be acknowledged, while you continue pushing them into the shadows to maintain an attachment built on emotional compromise. You call it anxiety, but in reality, it is the muffled scream of parts of you that have been forgotten, rejected, amputated in the name of what you mistakenly called love. It's not just emotional discomfort, it's your inner truth trying to warn you that something is profoundly wrong, that you are living a psychological lie, and the price you're paying to maintain this attachment is far too steep. The alarm of the soul arrives like a storm before the transformation. The same anxiety you've been desperately trying to silence will eventually become the very compass guiding you home to yourself. But first, you must be willing to hear what it's been trying to tell you all along. The human psyche consists of multiple dimensions that require harmony to function properly. When you suffocate your authentic needs and boundaries to sustain a relationship, that harmony shatters. What remains is a painful internal fragmentation that manifests as the very anxiety you've been fighting. It isn't merely fear of abandonment. It's an internal civil war between what you truly feel and what you permit yourself to acknowledge. Every time you swallow your legitimate anger to avoid conflict, every time you whisper, "It's fine," when you're actually collapsing inside, every time you accept behavior that violates your values, you deepen this split within yourself. The anxiety intensifies not as punishment, but as protection. It's your psyche's desperate attempt to restore equilibrium, to reconcile the growing distance between who you've become and who you truly are. You feel that crushing weight in your chest because you're trying to compress your expansive truth into the suffocating confines of someone else's expectations. Your racing thoughts aren't random. They're your mind frantically searching for solutions to an impossible equation: how to maintain connection without complete self-erasure. The constant fear of losing them persists because, at some level, you recognize you've already lost something far more precious: your connection to yourself. And this anguish doesn't magically vanish with their reassurance, their temporary return, or their hollow promises of change. The problem isn't their inconsistency, it's your disconnection from your own inner guidance system. As long as you continue seeking externally what can only be rebuilt from within, anxiety will remain your constant companion, not as your enemy, but as the alarm signaling your soul's deepest needs. This internal fragmentation isn't the end of your story, though. It represents an invitation, a painful but necessary calling, to reintegrate the parts of yourself sacrificed for conditional acceptance. It asks you to listen to what this persistent discomfort has been trying to communicate all along, and to reclaim the pieces of your identity abandoned in the desperate pursuit of validation. But to truly understand why you keep returning to someone who causes such profound suffering, you must be willing to confront what lurks in the shadows of your unconscious, those disowned aspects of yourself that, though hidden, still govern your most destructive patterns. What waits in these shadows holds the key to why you repeatedly choose what quietly destroys you. The shadow self, as Carl Jung defined it, emerges when you finally ask the most uncomfortable question. What if you're not simply a victim of poor relationship choices, but an unconscious architect of your own suffering? You believe you consciously select your relationships, but what if the most hidden dimensions of your psyche are actually making these decisions for you? What if it's not bad luck or coincidence that you repeatedly find yourself entangled with those who cannot meet your needs? Perhaps it's the disowned aspects of yourself, your shadow, silently orchestrating these patterns from the depths of your unconscious. The shadow contains everything you've learned to reject about yourself, all that your family, society, and culture deemed unacceptable, shameful, or dangerous. These aren't just random qualities, but essential parts of your wholeness that, denied conscious expression, were banished to the darkest corners of your mind. But burying these aspects doesn't eliminate them. What you repress transforms into psychological energy seeking expression through indirect channels, and relationships provide the perfect stage for this unconscious drama. Jung warned that what you resist persists, and nowhere is this more evident than in our romantic attachments. You don't attract what you want, you attract what mirrors your hidden self. This explains why, despite your conscious intentions, you repeat the same destructive cycles with different people. You change the face, the name, the specific circumstances, but the underlying pattern remains identical. You compromise your needs, they fail to value you, you rationalize their behavior, you sacrifice more of yourself while calling it devotion. This isn't misfortune or destiny imposed from outside, it's an internal pattern seeking resolution. Do you consistently choose emotionally unavailable partners? Partners who require you to earn basic respect? Those who alternate between intensity and coldness? Ask yourself what these relationships reveal about what you've hidden from your own awareness. Perhaps you deny your own need for independence, your healthy anger, your right to prioritize yourself, and so you're magnetically drawn to those who embody these disowned qualities in exaggerated form. You submit to someone who displays exactly what you don't permit in yourself. The shadow operates through projection, casting parts of yourself onto others where you can interact with them from a seemingly safe distance. You find yourself repelled by certain behaviors in them that trigger disproportionate emotional responses. These reactions often signal shadow material. You hate in them what you cannot accept in yourself. You're simultaneously attracted to qualities you've abandoned in your own development. It's a sophisticated psychological mechanism that remains invisible until you're ready to confront it. As long as you refuse to recognize these disowned aspects of yourself, your shadow will continue attracting situations that reflect it, compelling you to finally see what you've been avoiding. It's not enough to simply leave toxic relationships. You must understand what draws you to them repeatedly. This requires extraordinary courage, the willingness to look inward and acknowledge that part of the pattern originates within you. These patterns didn't develop randomly. They emerged from early wounds, unmet needs, and survival adaptations that once protected you but now limit your capacity for healthy connection. What kept you safe as a child becomes the very prison constraining you as an adult. The compulsion to repeat these patterns isn't punishment. It's your psyche's attempt to heal what remains unresolved. But how do you transform these unconscious patterns into conscious choice? How do you integrate these shadow aspects rather than continuing to project them outward? The answer lies in what Jung called the individuation process, the psychological journey of reclaiming your wholeness by facing what you've denied and discovering that what you feared most about yourself might actually contain the key to your liberation. And just as you begin this process of self-reclamation, you'll make a discovery so counterintuitive, so contrary to everything you've believed about letting go, that it will fundamentally alter how you understand attachment itself. What if the path to freedom isn't about forgetting them at all? There comes a moment when the pain becomes so unbearable that something inside you finally breaks open. I've been there too. That exact point where you can no longer sustain the division between who you pretend to be and who you truly are. This breaking point, as devastating as it feels, marks the beginning of your actual healing. This moment of collapse is what Carl Jung recognized as the first real step in individuation, the psychological process through which you stop being a hostage to your unconscious patterns and begin the journey of becoming whole again. But make no mistake, this path isn't decorated with inspirational quotes or comfortable affirmations. It's a confrontation with everything you've been running from. You'll need to face it all: your deepest insecurities, your childhood wounds, the ways you've abandoned yourself repeatedly. You'll need to acknowledge how, in many moments, you weren't just a passive recipient of pain, but an active participant in relationships that reflected your unhealed parts. Not because you wanted to suffer, never that, but because these patterns were the only maps you had for navigating connection. I know how much it hurts to admit this. I felt that same resistance, that same defensive reaction that wants to insist, but I tried everything. I gave everything. And you did give everything, except the one thing that mattered most: honest attention to the wounded parts of yourself that kept drawing you back to someone who couldn't truly see you. Individuation begins the moment you stop desperately trying to change them and start curiously examining yourself. When you finally ask, why do I feel so empty without their validation? What part of me believes I don't deserve consistent love? What am I trying to heal through this person that can only be healed through self-reclamation? These questions burn. They expose raw nerve endings. Each one requires you to look at yourself with an honesty that feels almost cruel at first. But within each painful realization lies a seed of freedom. Each time you choose self-awareness over self-deception, you reclaim a fragment of your power. Every boundary you establish, every time you honor your feelings instead of dismissing them, every instance where you choose silence over begging for scraps of attention, you're saying yes to your deeper self. You're breaking free from the false identity constructed to please others and building something authentic in its place. The most transformative realization comes when you understand that their presence or absence no longer determines your worth. The person who once seemed like your entire world becomes right-sized, neither demon nor savior, just another human with their own wounds and limitations. Their inability to love you as you deserved reflects nothing about your value and everything about their own unhealed places. Jung observed that individuation is ultimately about becoming who you already are beneath the adaptations and masks. It's remembering that your wholeness was never actually lost, only forgotten beneath layers of protective covering. The journey isn't about becoming someone new, but returning to your essential nature, now strengthened by conscious awareness of your shadows and gifts alike. I've watched this process unfold in my own life and in countless others who found themselves shattered by relationships that couldn't hold their fullness. The initial devastation of letting go eventually reveals itself as the necessary collapse that precedes rebuilding. What feels like death becomes a doorway to a more authentic existence. And here's what no one tells you about truly letting go. It doesn't happen through force or premature forgiveness or artificial detachment. Real liberation arrives through the gateway of complete presence with your pain, by allowing yourself to feel everything you've been avoiding. When you stop running from the grief, the rage, the heartbreak, something miraculous happens. These emotions, given space to simply exist without judgment, begin to transform on their own. Letting go is fundamentally practical, not mystical. It's a decision implemented through concrete daily actions, not a magical moment of sudden emotional freedom. Many people remain stuck, waiting for some perfect emotional state before they can move forward. This approach keeps you perpetually trapped in the waiting room of your own life. The reality about detachment is straightforward. It's behavioral first, emotional second. Your feelings will lag behind your actions by weeks or sometimes months. If you wait to feel ready before creating distance, you'll likely remain attached indefinitely. This is because emotional systems don't recalibrate while still receiving intermittent reinforcement from the same person who destabilized them initially. Start with measurable changes. Delete their contact information, remove digital reminders, establish clear communication boundaries. These aren't dramatic gestures, they're pragmatic steps that create the necessary conditions for your nervous system to reset. Each time you resist the urge to check their social media, you're rewiring neural pathways that previously equated their validation with your survival. What drives this attachment is rarely the specific person, but what Carl Jung identified as their symbolic function in your unconscious. They represent unresolved aspects of your history, often parental dynamics, childhood adaptations, or core beliefs about your worthiness. When you understand this, you realize the pain isn't actually about them disappearing from your life. It's about these unresolved patterns demanding recognition. The withdrawal symptoms you experience, the obsessive thoughts, emotional volatility, physical discomfort, are evidence of psychological dependency, not evidence of cosmic connection. Your brain has associated this person with neurochemical responses similar to addiction. Understanding this biological basis helps depersonalize the process and view recovery as a neurological rehabilitation rather than a romantic failure. Many people mistake intensity for intimacy, drama for passion, and anxiety for love. These confusions stem from early attachment patterns where inconsistent care taught you that emotional stability equals disinterest, while turbulence signals importance. Recognizing these distortions allows you to consciously select healthier relationships moving forward. The most crucial realization isn't that you need to forget this person, but that you need to remember yourself. Not who you became to earn their approval, your authentic self that existed before their influence and will continue long after. This isn't abstract. It requires identifying specific interests, perspectives, and preferences you abandoned during the relationship and systematically reclaiming them. Jung observed that psychological freedom comes from integrating what we've disowned rather than further fragmenting ourselves through denial. This means acknowledging both your participation in dysfunctional patterns and your capacity to choose differently now. It's recognizing that while you didn't cause the damage, healing it remains your responsibility. What keeps most people bound to those who hurt them isn't love but unprocessed grief for the relationship they imagined, for the parts of themselves sacrificed, for the future they envisioned. Processing this grief requires naming specific losses and allowing yourself to experience their emotional impact without the numbing behaviors that perpetuate attachment. The final step in letting go isn't forgiveness or forgetting, but functional neutrality, where thoughts of this person no longer trigger significant emotional reactivity. This state isn't achieved through forced positivity, but through consistent boundaries, reduced exposure, and redirected attention toward your own development. When you've truly let go, you don't need to convince yourself or others of your progress. You simply notice that days pass without thought of them, that your energy flows toward new connections and experiences, that your emotional baseline has stabilized. This transition happens gradually, through accumulated small choices rather than grand gestures. What remains after healthy detachment isn't emptiness, but space, room for relationships aligned with your authentic self rather than your compensatory patterns. The capacity to engage from wholeness rather than need. The ability to recognize red flags not as challenges to overcome, but as information guiding wiser selections. Jung said that the privilege of a lifetime is becoming who you truly are. Perhaps the most practical form of letting go is simply deciding, with all the clarity of your rational mind, that you will no longer abandon yourself for someone else's conditional acceptance. Not because it sounds enlightened, but because it works. If this message resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe for more. And if you'd like to support the channel, a super thanks